Okay.
Hi, Emmanuel.
Hi, Emmanuel.
Yeah. Thank you. How are you?
Good. How are you?
There.
I'm okay. I'm okay. How are you?
We're happy to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Harold is grinding down in the basement, so if it gets noisy, I'll mute myself.
Well, I'm not sure where Ross is. My Frankie and Nathania have moved home to Toronto yesterday.
Yeah, how's that feel to have your house back?
We're not sure yet. Their room, Nathania said, I'll clean it before I leave. And Frankie was like, oh, well, they'll have to vacuum it anyhow. And Nathania went, now we'll vacuum it. I'm like, yeah, but usually people go under the bed. I'm pulling stuff out from under their bed going, oh. But we got to move back.
Put it on the table for you.
I know.
They're moved back to Toronto.
Okay.
And Nathania has 2 weeks of work. I'm gonna wait till Bonnie comes back. But my daughter has had no work since March. But she got 2 weeks starting tomorrow. Well, starting today. So we're happy.
Yeah, I heard part of that. Sarah was just asking me a question. Sorry about that.
Oh, Nathania has 2 weeks of work.
Good.
Yes.
That
Better
should
than
mean
nothing.
just 2 weeks.
Just 2 weeks at the moment. So we'll see.
More, Lord. Send more.
Yes, we're hoping. And Frankie is waiting to find out about school. She's got one class that is hands-on, so she has to be at school to do it.
Oh, gee, yeah. Practical.
Yeah, and so
Not everything can be online.
yeah, and so they're not sure how they'll have the students coming in to do it and still maintain all the distance. So we were down there helping them move home, and I will be honest, I was a little bit nerve-wracking to be in Toronto.
Yeah, because all the infection that's down there. Emmanuel, we have a lot of COVID in Canada, but only in the big cities. Like where we live in this small town, we don't have very much, but in the cities they have lots.
Yeah, and I stopped to see my friend who's being super, super careful because she's having chemo right now. So we did a social distance, but I'm being very careful because my immune system is still not what it should be.
Yeah, you have to be extra careful.
I like to think of cancer as the gift that keeps on giving.
Maybe not the gift you want, but
Let me give you something new.
You have to be positive.
I'm always positive. Okay.
Why don't you go ahead and start, and then people can join us. They do.
That's what I'm going to do, because we're going to put this up on the YouTube channel, and I will share it to WhatsApp so that people can watch it. But I thought it would be easier because I guess when I film myself, I don't talk loudly enough. So if I am not loud enough, raise your hand. Okay. Lifespan development is looking at how we change over time. And one of the things that we look at when we're talking about lifespan development is the physical, the changes in the body and the development, the cognitive, how we think, how we learn to talk, how we read, how we become creative, how we learn to problem solve. And finally, there's psychosocial, how emotions and relationships and personality change over time. And so those are the things that people started looking at and going, does everybody develop the same way? Do people raised in different ways develop things differently? And one of the things that's happened is there has been some researchers who were pretty racist, and what they did is they looked at people and tried to always compare and make it that because there are some things that develop differently in other cultures, that this proves somebody was superior or somebody was not. But we started to look at it and realize there are typical ages for different changes to occur, skills to develop, and they happen all over the world in the same order. We also realize that ages are age ranges. So it's not like you have to be walking by 10 months. Somewhere, if they say you must be doing this by 12 months, anywhere between 10 months and 18 months is normal. That normal kids develop at slightly different levels. So one of the things I'm often telling parents who are worried because their child is in grade 1 and still can't write the alphabet, and I say, it doesn't matter how smart you are, but school readiness develops between age 4 and age 7. But in Canada, we put all children in school starting at age 4. And some of those children still just want to be running around in circles and playing. And some of those children are ready to sit down and listen. They have the fine motor skills that they're ready to start practicing handwriting. Their memory is well enough developed that they can remember what the teacher says. But for those kids who aren't ready, school becomes something that's really, really difficult. We also know there are things that have more variability than other. Walking has a broader range than crawling does. So walking anytime between 10 and 18 months is pretty normal, but crawling has a much narrower range. And we look at when those things are late, it tells us that maybe the child has a problem with development. So if you don't have, if you're not saying 1 or 2 words by the age of 14 months, we start to go, this is a problem, because by that time you should be able to say things like mama, dada, you should be able to say dog or whatever in your language. So those are things. Now there's physical milestones like rolling over, sitting up, and crawling and walking. There's cognitive, those are things like your first words, 2 to 3 word sentences, understanding that things don't change, they stay the constant, cause and effects. Then there's smiling, emotional regulation, friendships, conflict resolution. So they're all throughout the lifespan, there are milestones. One of the things they used to think was that development went evenly. So that if your language skills are developing, your motor skills are developing, your social skills are developing. And so they thought it went like a straight line. Everything developed steadily. But then they realized there are some kids who their motor skills are just going steady, steady, steady. But their language skills are kind of like, and not developing steady. They're so focused on their motor, their language skills aren't developing as quickly. We also realize that it's not constant progress. Some kids go, okay, I have learned to crawl, and I'm gonna just keep crawling for a while. Some kids skip the crawling stage and go straight to walking. Okay, I have to figure out how to add people. Hang on, 2 people just arrived. Admit, admit, okay. So I've just admitted 2 more people. But we also realize that sometimes kids skip stages, and there is an impact of it. Some kids go straight to walking. They never crawl. And crawling involves a movement like this. And your head goes up and down when you're crawling. And one of the things we found is that kids who don't go through the crawling stage can have problems with left-right discrimination. When they're older, can have problems using both hands together. And they have problems looking up and having their vision accommodate. Because since they didn't go through this stage, their brain didn't get used to look far away, look close up, look far away, look close up. So we know that skipping some of it can cause problems later on. But we also know things develop unevenly, that it's not as nice and pretty and smooth. Some kids pause for a while. We also know that some kinds of discontinuous development where things stop for a while is very common in children with autism. It's also very common in children with autism for one area to be developing quickly and another area to be going very, very slowly, which is why with children with autism, you have to keep watching it. We also know that when children are traumatized, development becomes uneven. So if I'm 5 years old and my language skills are developing, and I'm learning to walk, and I've learned how to do fine motor skills, and everything looks like it's going normal, and then my mother dies of cancer, I may all of a sudden be struggling and my language doesn't grow for a while. I don't get more vocabulary. I might have been learning to recognize the alphabet, but now all of a sudden I'm not learning to read any words. So we know that when bad things happen to them, expecting them to keep learning in school, they may not be able to do it. And we need to accept that that's normal. We keep working with them, but we have to say, okay, this may be slowed down right now because they're traumatized. And right now, one of the things I'm dealing with in Huron County is we had a bunch of Syrian refugees come in. And usually after a year or two in English, most of our students are able to get by. They've achieved a certain level of English, particularly when they're little kids. But for some of our Syrian students, learning those English as a second language skills, because they came speaking Arabic, it's taking them longer to learn English than we expect. And we need to say, this does not mean this child is not smart. This means this child is dealing with so much trauma and so much change that they don't have the brain power to also be developing a new language. Once things stabilize those kids, we start to see their language skills developing. And we also know some different types of traits. Language is more likely to be discontinuous. It's more likely to, I grow and grow and grow and then I stay stable. Motor skills tend to be pretty continuous in development. We also do know that child rearing can impact development a little bit. One of the things, there's a country where the babies are carried pretty much until they're about 1.5 years old. So their walking develops at 23 to 25 months, not at 10 to 18 months. But what's funny is people thought, oh, that means all of their motor skills are going to be weaker and more delayed. But in the culture where this was studied the more, it's a very physically active culture because they still do a lot of gathering of food from the rainforest. So the kids are climbing up trees to get fruit. The kids are going through the bushes to find plants that grow on the ground. And even though they are late walkers, when you compare their motor skills to North American kids, they are much better at climbing. They are much better at balance. They are much better at jumping. So we know that the culture is affecting them. Okay, what is going on? I'm echoing. I'm getting a really weird echo of my voice, so I had to stop for a minute and wait for it to finish. As I said, there's different areas we look at that they develop. And one of the first theories of personality development was Freud. Before Freud, philosophers had talked about it, but they hadn't done any research and they hadn't looked at it like a normal development. One theory was that children are born a complete blank slate. They know nothing and you can teach them anything. Well, what we started to look at was there is limits, but what are the kinds of things that shape it? And Freud focused on sexuality. How does your sexual development affect your personality? It's really important to remember that Freud based all of his theories on upper middle class Europeans and mostly women. So one of the problems is it doesn't apply to everybody. But he did believe childhood events shape personality. But what he did is, as I said, he focused everything on sex and pleasure. So babies are in the oral stage, and the reason they are sucking and the reason they put everything in their mouth is because that's how they get oral pleasure. So he said that people who get stuck in that stage are immature and never have mature relationships. Anal, he said, is the toilet training stage. And so that's where they focus on their backside for pleasure. And he came up with the idea that people who get stuck at that stage have obsessive compulsive, are obsessed with cleanliness, and are more likely to be homosexual. None of this is true, by the way, but this was his theory. The phallic one, he emphasized that this is when kids are really interested in penises, and this is when little girls wish they were little boys. Again, this does not hold up. And he also believed that the only way that a woman could be happy, therefore, was to give in to a man who had what she wanted. He then said latency. Kids at this age are not interested in sex. 9 to 12-year-olds are focused on learning, friendships, and sports. And the genital is when you finally want to be interested in the opposite sex. And he said that healthy women would want to be mothers and healthy men would want to be successful in the business world. Again, this was one of the first theories of development. I'm not spending a lot of time on it because research has never held it up to hold up being true. So he's always said that weaknesses in any of those areas mean you can't form mature relationships. And that meant that a woman who didn't have a husband, in his mind, must have mental health problems, no matter what their reason was for not marrying. And I don't know, in our country, not so much nowadays, but in my husband's parents' era, it was very common in a large family that one daughter would never marry because it was her job to stay and take care of the parents. But in Freud's mind, that meant she was mentally ill and hadn't gotten mature. So his doesn't hold up because there's no research to support it. The problems he predicted because of the child is stuck at the oral stage or the child is stuck at the anal stage don't hold up. So his theory was that kids who had problems with toilet training would be obsessive compulsive because they were obsessed with the cleanliness and withholding. Doesn't hold up. It was very much about problems he saw in upper middle class women. And the other thing was, because of the time it was, he refused to believe any stories of gender violence. He refused to believe any stories of sexual trauma. So he refused to believe that any of those mental health problems were caused because people had experienced real terrible things in their childhood. So it wasn't working. But one of the things that was positive about Freud is he believed that mental illnesses were treatable. You just had to get them through those stages. And that's a real shift because prior to that, people believed that if you were mentally ill, that's it, you're stuck. It's like that for permanent. And so families who had somebody who experienced depression or a mental illness often locked that family member away for good. And there was even a place in England called Bedlam, and this is really horrible. You could buy a ticket to go to Bedlam, and you would go in there, and it was mentally ill people. And you could watch them like you were watching a circus. So they really weren't treating them as human beings. So Freud did have some positive effect. But Erikson started to really look at what are the things we need to accomplish at different ages. How do those social interactions and accomplishment of those goals begin to help us develop? And so he started to look at personality development, not in terms of stages that we have no control of, but how our sense of self develops because of how we interact with others and how we are able to accomplish the goals that are occurring during our life. And he also came from a really positive view. Freud and some of the philosophers came from the view that if we don't civilize children, if we don't work to teach them things, they will grow up to be savages. So their belief came from this, the natural outcome for children is to be nasty, violent little creatures unless we work really, really hard to make them be good. Whereas Erikson went, we all want to have friends. We all want to be connected. We all want to be competent. And so the drive is to become competent. And our ultimate goal is to become a good human being. So he couched it in a much more positive thing. And so these are the stages he looked at. And the first, so I'm going to leave it up for a minute, and then I'm going to go through it. If you can see, his stages of development go all the way to when we're about to die. And Bonnie's going to cover from stage 6, 7, and 8. I'm only doing it up to the end of stage 5. Remember when I talked about my sisters? This is the section that made me go, oh, because there's a fairly large gap. My older sister and I are 18 months apart. But my next sister is 10 years younger than me, and the sister after her is 12 years younger than me. So when I went home at 18 years of age from university, I had an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old sister who drove me crazy. But this helped me understand it. So those are the stages that you can look at and go back to. And I want you, if you've got time, to start to think about how you've seen these in your life. So the very first stage is about trust. And it's primary to all social relationships. If I don't trust my friend not to backstab me, I can't tell her anything. If I don't trust my neighbor not to steal from me, I'm not going to say hello to my neighbor. So it's very, very important. And if I don't trust people, I'm not going to be open with them. I'm going to lie to them in order to protect myself. And it's really important for mother-infant bonding, because that, or father if the mother dies, that first relationship is where babies learn, I can trust other people. So when the baby is hurt and crying, when mom comes to take care of it, it learns to trust. Mommy will always be there. I am loved. We saw in orphanages, lots of times children were given lots of food. They had enough warmth. All of those basic needs were met. But they didn't have the same caregiver. They had a different person every time. And those children grew up really struggling to form relationships, really struggling to be close to people because they had never learned in that baby stage to be close. Now, one of the studies that was done, and I put a YouTube link onto it, was by Harlow. And what he did is he took baby monkeys. And the monkeys were given either a mommy that gave food, and it was made of wire, as well as a mommy that was soft and cuddly. Well, they would go to the mother for food, but then they'd immediately go over to the other mother to get that warmth and cuddling. Because one of the things that Harlow was looking at is what we call the cupboard theory of love. Children love you because you feed them. But what the monkeys clearly showed is it wasn't that just that. You need to feel loved and safe. You need to feel attached. You need to feel like this person is here for me and I can count on them. They're not going to keep changing. But the other thing is, what we realized is, even though these monkeys got something to cuddle, Harlow makes it sound like, isn't it great? These monkeys picked the loving monkey over the monkey that just gave them food. It wasn't enough. These monkeys never learned how to interact with other monkeys. They were violent with other monkeys. They did not mate appropriately. Like, they got really, really aggressive and often beat up their partner. And you'd think monkeys would be born knowing how to care for their babies. When these monkeys got pregnant and had babies, the females did not know how to care for them. And often a lot of their baby monkeys died. So Harlow was trying to show us that monkeys need affection, not just food, like that affection is part of what we need. But what he also showed, without meaning to, is we need to be teaching kids how to have those social interactions. Trust isn't enough. And it's also kind of cool because when we look at babies in this infant development stage, babies want you to smile at them. And if you don't look at a baby with the smile on your face, the baby starts smiling to make you react. So when you do this at a baby, the baby starts doing this. But if you don't smile back, the baby starts doing this. And then the baby starts fussing and crying. So when you do it in an experiment, it's not going to ruin the baby because you're only doing it once or twice. But one of the problems we found is that babies with depressed mothers, we have to teach the moms, even though you're depressed, you need to smile at this baby. Otherwise, that baby grows up with poor trust, and that baby has all kinds of social problems when it gets to grade 1, because it doesn't react properly to other children's facial expressions. So all these things that we think, oh yeah, they'll all be normal, there are things we can do to screw it up. So it's really important to smile back at your baby. So that's just a cute picture of a baby. And if you can't, our automatic response to a cute baby is to smile back. And when we don't do that, babies can tell and they get stressed out. Now, and it's in here somewhere, but I'm gonna, there is a section where I talk about babies also need familiarity. The toddlers, this is where they're learning to do it for themselves. This is why we talk about the terrible twos. Because kids are learning, I'll do it for me. Let me do it. I want to try. Hang on, what's going on? Somebody just came in. Oh, admitted. Good. Sorry, Emmanuel got lost and now he's come back in. So at 2, part of the development is to start to say, can try things on my own. I can do things on my own. And it's really important that we let those kids do it, because they need to realize I can fall down on my bum and pick myself up and keep walking. I can figure out how to put the food in my mouth. And as hard as that is on a parent because they make a mess or you're in a rush, when we interrupt that, those kids don't believe to begin that they can be independent. And we end up having to take care of them and do more things for them because they don't get that personality mindset that says, I'm competent. Okay. Now, at 3 to 6 years of age, up till then, mom and dad are the most important people in the child's life, as well as siblings. Between 3 to 6, they're starting to realize there are people outside of their immediate family. They're beginning to have friendships. They're now beginning to be able to talk so they can explain things. So this is the time where it becomes really important for us to be teaching those social rules. And Eric is saying, this is when they are learning what you're supposed to do to be appropriate in a relationship. Do they take turns? Do they use their words or do they bite you when there's conflicts? Do they hit? We're trying to teach them, use your words, use your words. We're trying to teach them to share. We're trying to teach them things like wait your turn. Because all of those, if I don't learn those, when I'm an adult, I'm selfish. When I'm an adult, I think I'm the most important person and I act entitled. When I'm an adult, I get angry and yell and fight. So this stage is very important because without it, you're not learning the basic respect other people when you grow up. Now, I can't see Florence or Emmanuel, but does anybody have any questions? Okay. From 7 to 11, this is what they call the industry versus inferiority. From 7 to 11, we begin to say to children, pick up your toys, do your homework, carry this to the table, help mommy bring this in. And we're expecting them to do it much more independently. And what we are teaching them is you are competent to take care of things and help out. So I don't know how much you see that here, but here we talk a lot about people who are entitled or students who are entitled. And if you fail them on a test, they think they still deserve that A because they've never learned I need to do the work to get the accomplishment and get the goal. So these are the people who, as adults, often complain that things aren't fair, but then don't seem to do anything to change it. These are the wives who say, well, I don't know how, my husband needs to do it, or they call their mother every day because they feel inadequate to manage the demands every day. In men, surprisingly enough, what you often see is these are the men who hit their wives because they don't feel very competent, so they get scared and worried that she will leave them because she can manage better. And this also leads to depression because these are the kids who, when they go, if they don't trust me to do it, it's because I'm not good enough. So I'm not a good person, I'm not worth it. So this is a really important stage to build that sense of I can do work and I can be competent. And one of the things I always say with parents, because this can be really difficult, we don't praise how smart you are or how many you got right. We need to praise how hard you worked and how much you got done. So if you wrote 30 words, even if only part of it's correct, you worked really hard to give me an answer. You were very cooperative. You really paid attention and tried to do your best. Because if the kid who gets 90 without trying and you go, oh, you're so smart, he never thinks he needs to learn to do work. He'll just have it come to him because he's smart. Now the teen years, this is, you are becoming your own person and you're separating from your parents, you're separating from your family. And this is where my little sisters would drive me crazy. I would come home and they would follow me around. They would point me out to their friends. Like I woke up one morning and my little sisters were standing at the side of my bed with 4 of their little friends going, this is our big sister. She goes to university. And I'm like, what are you doing in my room? Get out of my room. I would find them trying on my dresses because what they were trying to do was become grown-ups. They wanted to be seen as somebody like themselves. My one sister would constantly tell me things to try and shock me. So I had to get this unflappable, that's nice, so that she would not pull me into fights. And that what they're trying to do is go, I'm not like you, I'm different. And they're trying to figure out, who am I? What do I believe? Who do I choose as friends? What are my beliefs in faith? And this is often very hard for families because this is when your kid goes, I'm not going to church and you can't make me. So my children were altar servers. All 3 of my kids were altar servers. And then my son hits 15. And not only will he not be an altar server, he is never going to church again. But what we know is where the beliefs that we are teaching them in their early years, in their teen years, they may determine, I prefer to wear my hair in wild colors. They may go, I really like loud rock music. But what we know is as they become more adult, their moral values tend to be closer to what their parents believe than to what their friends believe. But it is very much a time when they are going, who am I? One of the positives about this time, for children who come from families with really bad beliefs or really bad behaviors, it becomes the times they start to look around and say, my friend's parents aren't alcoholics, and their house is much nicer than mine, and I like the way they live. So if you've got a healthy family, kids tend to stick with those values even though they fight like crazy with you during those teen years. But they come back to it. But teens who come from families that are very unhealthy, where there's abuse, where there's lying, where there's alcohol problems. In the US, you often see it because the US has a horrible group called the KKK. You often see teenagers who are in schools where there's really a diverse population and they start to question the horrible beliefs. So there are some, it can be a positive thing, not all, but as I said, some of those kids will question it, but still go back to the bad beliefs of their parents because it was what they were raised with and it's what they really know. But those teen years are really hard because it's like, I jokingly say, my daughter, my oldest daughter, if I said the sky was blue, she would say, well, you know, it isn't actually, that's just a reflection. Okay. If I said, oh, we're having that pasta dish you like for dinner, I don't like it anymore. She did not want to be like me. And so I joke, she went to live in Brazil for a year and go to school in Brazil, and she came home and she can speak Portuguese, and she's done some volunteer work because of that. But I joke that it was a good thing we sent her away because everything was an argument, and that's that individuation process. And so often when we're talking with families, and I'm working with families, I'm saying, praise what they're trying out, provided it's not a dangerous bad thing. So if your child is wearing clothing and you're going, well, why would they pick that? If it's not sexually revealing, those are beautiful colors. You have I like you're really learning to pick colors you like. If your child is reading all kinds of comic books, I am so glad to see you are reading. I am glad to see you want to keep reading. Don't mention that it's horrible books. And it's really hard. You don't necessarily praise the what, but you praise them trying. And you say, why do you like those books? Why did you pick those colors? Because you want to try and keep those lines of communication open, because you want to keep them knowing that you approve of them trying things out, but you put limits on it. And the rules I have for those limits are, is it permanent? So when my daughter was graduating from grade school, I made her a blue dress, and she wanted to color her hair blue to match it. It's not permanent. Blue hair color goes away. If it's not permanent, you can do it. Then she wanted to get big piercings in her ear. Piercings are permanent. You can't do it till you're 18. Is it life-threatening? You can't go out to a party where there's drinking because the boys are driving and you'll get killed. So you cannot do drugs because drugs can kill you. So is it permanent? Is it life-threatening? Is it morally threatening? And that one's very much depends on what your family values are. So there were some things in our family. My sister, very different from me, let her daughter's boyfriend sleep in the same room as her daughter. And I said, no, that doesn't happen in our house. It's morally threatening. It makes you act as every person you date is as important as a husband, and they're not. So those are how I picked what I would fight about. And if it wasn't permanent, life-threatening, or morally threatening, I would go, yes, that purple hair is lovely. Yes, I am fine with you wearing that outfit to church. It covers everything important. We're good to go. It's just not white. You want to stay up till 2 in the morning watching your TV show? That's okay. You're still getting up for school. It's not worth fighting about it. But she wanted to go to a party where I knew there were no parents, and I knew the 19-year-old brother was home for the weekend, and I knew the 19-year-old brother was buying alcohol for all the 14-year-olds. And I said, you can't go. So that's why I'm saying you need to look at, because those fights, if they're too big, can break that relationship, and then you're not there to guide them. Bonnie's covering the adult stages. Now, so that was the focus on personality. Piaget focused, how do children learn to think? Because little kids, one of the difficulties with little kids is they don't have language, and without language, it's really hard to think. So he looked at how do we learn to think? And one of the things he came up with was schemata, the ideas we form to explain the world. So if your family has a dog, your child learns the word dog. And now he calls every single animal dog. He has in his head, all animals are dogs. But then mom goes, no, that's a sheep, or that's a cat. And all of a sudden he goes, oh, there are dogs and there are not dogs. But then he starts to go, there are animals. So he's building up the scheme of the world and his ability to explain it. So Piaget looked at a number of different stages. And when we're little, we can't talk. So we are learning about the world through our senses and our actions. We're learning things like object permanence and sensory. 2 to 6-year-olds are pre-operational. They're beginning to use words and images to represent things, but they lack logical reasoning. So this is why 5-year-olds can believe in Santa Claus. Now they can use words, they can think things through a little bit, but they got no logic, because logically you can go, how can a person get all the way around the world in one night and deliver all those toys? So sometimes when I'm working with parents and their child's struggling with something, I ask them, does he still believe in Santa Claus? And that means I can't do cognitive behavioral therapy with them if they do, because they cannot understand that not all thoughts make sense. The concrete operational stage is they're beginning to have more of that logic, and the formal operational, now they really understand. They can problem solve. They can understand things like politics. So we're going to go through a little bit. We're learning about the world at the sensory motor stage by physically interacting. Because so if I let go of the rattle, it will drop every time. And every single mother in the world has gone through this. Object permanence. When you cover something up for a baby, they act like it's gone. They do not try to look for it. They accept every single person who picks them up because they haven't started to realize that mommy is a specific person and she exists even when she isn't there. Little kids, if I can't see it, it's disappeared from the world. It no longer exists. Stranger anxiety, which happens around 12 months. This is because kids start going, wait a minute, you don't look like my mommy. You're not mommy. So I've got some stuff in here about the sensory moment. You can go and look at what object permanence is. Now, stranger anxiety occurs because the child now recognizes mother and is fearful of what's unfamiliar. And one of the things I want to talk about is because if I see that racism is taught, not learned, not is taught, because nobody's born racist, actually we need to teach people not to be racist, because if people are not familiar to you, if they don't look like what you're familiar with, you react with discomfort. So as early as 3 months of age, babies who have not been exposed to other races will be uncomfortable when they see a person who doesn't look like their family. And that's stranger anxiety. It's like, you don't look like what I'm used to. We can also do the thing where they show a baby a picture of a face where we've moved the eyes to the wrong spot. Babies do the same thing. So when people say racism is taught, I always say no, not being racist. So one of the things I talk about is we need to expose children to diversity, whether it's in books, whether it's on TV, whether it's in real life, so that we are exposing them to so much that they no longer have what we call those cognitive biases of if it's unfamiliar, it's not as good. And talking about why things that are different are just as good. So an apple tastes like an apple, whether it's a nice, perfectly round apple or a weirdly shaped apple. And all people want this. But it's really important that we recognize that stage where you start to realize things, what faces look like and what's familiar, is really important stage where we want to expose them to as many different things as possible to help with that. And I also want to say that's why understanding development has a part of the big picture. Because you wouldn't think that a child learning to recognize what familiar is part of that whole roots of a big social issue. Now they're starting to use pre-operational stages, they're starting to use words to represent things. Their language is developing. They start doing pretend play because they can picture the object even if it isn't there with them. So you can see a little kid carrying around a piece of bark pretending he's talking on the cell phone to his friends. He's got the image of the cell phone in his head so he can carry it around in his hand even though it's a piece of bark. One of the things that's kind of cool at this stage is because the language is developing. Children who grow up in a family with 2 languages and a child who grows up in a family with 1 language, they have the same number of words, the same age. So they both are growing the vocabulary at the same rate. The problem for the child with the language in 2 languages, they may know the word in the first language, not in the second language. So when you work with kids who are 5 or 6, and they come from a bilingual family, sometimes it looks like their understanding is weaker, but it really isn't. The other problem with kids at this age, although they're starting to understand that other people exist and they're looking at them, they have what's called egocentrism. Teenagers get it too, but for a different reason. 5-year-olds genuinely believe, I am the center of the universe. It's not just that they want attention, they don't understand that other people have different feelings than they do, different thoughts than they do, and different knowledge. So the child is thinking, pay attention to me, pay attention to me. And if I like it, you must like giving me that attention. So when you're saying, not now, I have to do this, they literally can't understand that that thing you're trying to do is as important to you as them showing you the piece of bark that the cell phone is to them. They think that if they like ice cream, everybody likes ice cream. And one of the things that they do that when you're working with a kid is they start telling you a story in the middle because they assume you understand it. So I was working with a little boy who was really struggling at school, and we were trying to get it set up so he could start to do some learning. And I said, so how are you? And he goes, oh, well, last night was exciting. And he starts to tell me this story. He started kind of in the middle. And I'm thinking, this is terrible. This is horrible that what happened to him. This is awful. And then he said, and then the movie ended because I had to go to bed. Till that point, he had never told me that this isn't what was physically happening to him. And it's because at his age, he just didn't get that if you don't tell people kind of the background, they're looking at you going, what are you talking about? That's that egocentrism. They're also the kids, Mommy, go get this for me. I don't know where it is, but you know where I put it? No, no, I don't. So there's a YouTube link that will also show you how that egocentrism works. Next one is that formal operational stage. Now they can think. They can consider more than one piece of information to solve a problem. They can understand other people's feelings. They can make those kinds of decisions. We talk a lot about teenagers being egocentric. It's not because they can't understand other people's opinion. It's because they are so concerned with how am I developing, what do people think of me, who am I, that they think everybody else is judging them the same way. So it's not that they don't think other people have different feelings. They just think everybody's judging me. And it's more social anxiety. Now, Piaget stopped at a formal operational stage. A whole bunch of research has happened, and Bonnie will probably go into this as well, where we recognize that we don't just use logic to solve problems. Part of our development becomes relationships. So the most logical decision might be to buy this particular house. The decision you make is, it's too far away from my mother, and she needs me to come and see her every day. So relationship status is incorporated into decisions, and now they're talking about emotional intelligence, and that's a big thing. Now, Kohlberg looked at moral development because he said, this is really important. How do we learn what's right and wrong? Some of the earlier people focused totally on, we do what's right and wrong because of what God says. He says, but how do we come to understand that? Some people said, you know, we only do what's right or wrong because of punishment. Now, Piaget also had a theory of moral development, but Kohlberg looked at how cognition, emotion, and relationship. And what's really funny is this is my area of research. My thesis looked at how can individuals with developmental disabilities still make moral decisions. So if anybody's ever interested in talking about how morality develops, I have a whole bunch of information on it. But, if you see this is the nice little chart that shows you how morality works. And you can see one of the first parts of morality is we basically are obedient because we don't want to get in trouble. So we're not thinking about whether or not the behavior is right and wrong. It's whether or not mommy or daddy said it was right or wrong. And then we start to obey because we want to get treats. We want to get reward. The next stage is you start to go, wait a minute. This is how society behaves. This is wrong because people will think I'm a bad person if I behave this way. So we're beginning to obey social authority. We're beginning to obey what the rules are and beginning to understand the rules exist for a reason. The problem with staying at that level is Nazi Germany. A lot of people went, the government is saying this is the way to behave. I will conform with this because this is the social rule. So Kohlberg said we need to go beyond that. We need to look at social order versus individual rights. We need to look at how our ethics are driven by underlying principles. So one of his classic examples is man's wife has cancer. The pharmacy, the medication only costs a few dollars to make. Since it will cure her illness, the pharmacy is charging many thousands of dollars. The man steals the medication to save his wife's life. He saves her life, but he goes to prison. Was what he did right or wrong? So people will talk about the ethics of life. That's more important than the value of the property. And that was considered a universal moral, that human life is of value. And what we do to protect human life is what makes the behavior ethical. Now, one of the things that was kind of interesting is Kohlberg, I'm trying to keep it out of the way, Kohlberg thought that males had better moral standards. And there was Gilligan, who was a woman who was working with him, and he said it was because they hold the universal standards. Gilligan did some work, and she said one of the problems is when you do that one, gee, he should steal the medication to save his wife. Many women would respond with, he needs to try and negotiate, but he can't steal it because he'll end up going to prison. And if he is in prison, even if his wife is healthy, she will be alone, she will be afraid, and he will not be there to care for her. So there is morality that looks more at relationship. So there's a whole bunch of stuff we look at. How do kids learn to care about others and to make decisions based on caring for others, caring for the poor? What we really typically talk about is Christian morality, that belief that, whoever you have helped, you've helped me, which was what Christ said. When you feed the poor, you feed me. When you clothe the naked, you clothe me. So teaching children the morality of helping. We also have prenatal development, and I know I'm taking a long time here, I'm sorry. We know that our adult development and how we grow up as kids is affected by what happens to us in the uterus. So if I drink alcohol throughout my pregnancy, there are facial abnormalities the baby can have. There are problems with attention control. The child may test as intelligent, they just can't remember anything, and they can't seem to got in trouble for stealing candy from the store. Okay, so I'll never steal candy from the store again, that's bad. And they don't make the connection that stealing candy out of their friend's locker is bad too. Because their brain doesn't make those connections. And the reason that happens is, if you think about it, when your brain is growing, your neurons are all supposed to meet up like this. So they all partner up. When you drink alcohol, this neuron dies. This guy still needs to pair up to somebody. So he ends up pairing over here. So now there are too many neurons touching each other. So this guy's not supposed to turn on when this guy works. He does. So their brain, parts of it are reacting when they're not supposed to be, and so they're overreactive or hyperactive, and they just don't make good memories. Smoking, we used to mostly focus on the lowered birth weight. They're now finding that that lowered birth weight is also associated with an increased risk of learning disabilities. And we know that if you don't have folic acid, your chances of having a baby with spina bifida and hydrocephaly really increase. So that's one of the reasons we try to make sure women are getting enough folic acid in their diet. Illegal drugs can, you're muted, Bonnie.
Folic acid is from?
Oh gosh, I knew it.
Vegetables, salad, lovely tomatoes and onions and
Bananas.
bananas.
Yeah. We know with illegal drugs, you see withdrawals in the infants. There's not a lot of long-term impact, they think, although there's some of the same impulsivity that you see with alcohol. They do have poor arousal modulation. So stuff makes them more irritable, stuff makes them angrier, stuff makes them sadder, and they're just harder to calm down. The other thing is research. There are 2 new articles just came out that I read. And what it's saying is marijuana use in pregnancy increases the risk of autism. So anti-vaxxers keep talking about vaccinations cause autism. The other thing that has increased exponentially, along with vaccinations, is the common use of marijuana in North America and Europe. And because people believe it is a safe drug because it's natural, many women are smoking it while pregnant. And they're saying that may be a factor in the increases in autism. And somebody once said to me, man made alcohol, God made marijuana. Who are you going to trust? And I looked at them and went, God also made, poisonous mushrooms, arsenic. I don't think he meant for me to eat those either. So some of those weapons. Now, one of the things we know, I know this bounces back and forth because we talked about theories, now we're talking about some of the things that are present right at birth. There are newborn reflexes. So when you drop a baby, it goes like this to grab you. When you touch their foot, if their brain is intact, the foot will twitch. It's kind of funny. When my daughter had her first baby, there were some serious complications. So as soon as it was safe, I went in and I was doing all the reflexes on the baby to make sure that they were intact. And the nurse looked at my son-in-law and said, "Is she a nurse?" And he goes, "She's a doctor. She's just making sure the baby's okay." And then I went into my daughter, who knew it had been a bad birth, who knew the baby needed to be put with an oxygen tube down at her throat. And I said, "Aiden, you are not going to understand this right now. All her reflexes are intact. She's going to be okay." And so that was a real relief. But also, when I had my daughter Aiden 30 years ago, I had her at a teaching hospital. There's a whole bunch of young doctors there. And I took a shower and they took my baby away. And I'm like, "Why are you taking?" "Well, so you can have a shower." Fine. Well, I went back to get her from the baby room. And there's a whole bunch of doctors. And one of the doctors has my baby. And they're doing all the reflexes on her. And they go to do the Babinski reflex. And that's the one where you drop your arms like this. So the baby's in your arms like that. And you go, whoop. And the baby, if it's intact, will go like that. But it also fusses. So he goes, "Okay, we're going to do the Babinski." And I looked at him, I said, "I already did the Babinski on her. It's completely intact. I'm pretty sure she's got a difficult temperament because it took me forever to calm her down. Please don't do the Babinski on her." And the head doctor looks at me and goes, "Do we have your permission to do this?" And I was like, yes, your doctor needs to learn it. I understand you need to be able to recognize these reflexes, because if they're not there, there is a serious problem and you need to start figuring it out right away. Babies also have a strong sense of smell, and using a shirt that the mom wears as bedding will actually help them sleep better at night. Babies, if you give them a choice between a t-shirt their mom was wearing and a different t-shirt, they will snuggle up to the t-shirt. So there had been a little baby that had been abandoned at the hospital, and my daughter gave it to my daughter to care for until somebody could adopt it. So I said to my daughter, "Keep it close to your chest, and when you put it down to bed tonight, wrap it up in your shirt so it can smell you all night long." Baby got adopted. Now, our brain also keeps developing after birth. The number of brain cells is determined by the time we're born, which is why good nutrition is really important. The connections between the cells keep growing, and the intensity. So a cell connects like this. The same cell will grow what's called dendrites, and there are more of them, so it will have like more connections. So postnatal nutrition is really important to help that growth. Now, one of the things I always say to people is the protein in human breast milk is a protein that is important in brain growth. And the protein in cow's milk is associated with muscle growth. And that's the same. So when you are choosing how to feed your baby, first of all, breast milk's a lot cheaper. If you can do it, remember breast milk helps the baby's brain grow. Cow's milk will help with its muscle growth. So you want to give it that brain growth. Now, frontal lobes continue to develop until 18 or 21. Marijuana interferes with that development. So what it does is if you smoke marijuana while you're a teenager, it keeps your brain immature. We also know that boys' brains take longer to grow, and children with ADHD, it takes longer to grow. So I wanted to give some practical things that you can do to help infants develop so that they will be better in school, they will be more prepared. You give them things to hold, you give them things to reach for, you let them see different colors and talk to them all the time about anything. I was walking in the town we lived in and I was carrying my baby on my back because that's what I did. A lot of women here carry their babies on their back too. And I'm talking away to my daughter about there are birds and there are trees and the sky is blue. And this man was walking about 5 feet in front of me. And he turned around all of a sudden and said, "Why do you keep talking to me?" I was like, "I'm talking to the baby," because the more words your child hears, the better they do. And they did some research, and one of the things they found is that in working class families, because the parents are often so busy working, their kids don't get talked to as much. And the number of words you hear is directly related to how well you'll do in school. So talk, talk, talk. Even when they're teeny tiny babies, the more words they're hearing, the more their brain is getting time to learn. Another thing is let them move. The motor milestones, we're almost done, by the way. Lifespan development is really big. We also look at developmental milestones related to physical development. So you can see we've got physical milestones here, personal social milestones, language, and the cognitive. So it helps you to see what should we be seeing at age 2, at age 3, at age 4. And that was the end of it. I know I covered a lot of information. If you can read the chapter, that's great. If you've got questions, one of the things I'm trying to have people do is either put questions into the WhatsApp, because I figured out how to look at WhatsApp regularly, or questions in the email or on the classroom chat. Because what I want to do is either I can post short videos like this in answer to them and say, so Florence sent me in this question. Here's what I'm going to say, because I want to make sure that you're getting what you need. You are learning what you want to learn. So I've covered all the slides, and I managed to do that in just over an hour. So now we have time for questions. Mute, Bonnie, you have to unmute.
I have a question. If someone hasn't met their developmental milestone and they're an adult now and you're married to them, can people learn at a later age, and how can they learn?
Well, one, you try to figure out what are some of the places where the difficulties were. You can do what are called reparative experiences. And some of that, it depends on what the milestone is. Sometimes trust got interfered with. So you can teach, because they're now grown-ups and they have language, you can talk about trust. Sometimes it's because they didn't learn social skills. So you show them and you model them, and you, like, I'm working with an individual who is in his, he's now 42 and he has autism. I spent time talking to him about how do you smile and make eye contact when you're speaking to someone? Why do we take turns? How can you tell if it's something you can take turns for? So we did a lot of practice. I did a lot of, you know, if you sit like this, people think you're mad.
Mm-hmm.
So some of you can do it, but some of it depends. You got to kind of tailor it to the person. If the person never developed, had a helicopter parent, a parent who did everything for them, so they never learned autonomy. You say, you can do this yourself. I've showed you how to do it. Good, you've done it right. Or no, you need to correct this. Because one of the things we do with individuals who've never learned that autonomy, we get really mad at them because parents kept doing it for them, and you should be able to do this for. We get so frustrated with how much time it takes them to do it. We end up doing what their parents did and doing it for them. So I was working with mom, and she was saying, oh, but it takes me so long to get ready for school in the morning. I just pack it all up for him. And I said, and you'll be packing it all up for him when he's 15. And she went, what? I said, then his wife will be packing it up for him when he's 30. And she went, I said, it is hard. You may need to get up 15 minutes early. You may need for him to learn that if he didn't put his lunch in his bag, he goes hungry one day. Nobody has ever died of missing one lunch.
Good answer.
And I told one, and she said, oh, but if I didn't do it, he'd go to school in his pajamas. And I said, well, let him go to school in his pajamas. She said, oh, he won't care.
Never
He cared. He cared. He did it twice and then never did it again because the other kids made fun of him.
Good.
So some of it is going, even though it's driving me crazy, don't step in and do it for him.
Good one. Good one.
Mm-hmm. Other questions?
You there, Florence?
and I'm going to promote stimulation. There is nothing wrong with like carrying babies on your back. When I think about how I saw all the women when we were doing the sewing, women who had babies, that's what they did. That is a great way to build trust. That is a great way to build bonding. The other thing that I saw that was really nice was the little kids playing with slightly bigger kids, and the babies being played with the slightly bigger kids. And what that means is they're getting lots of stimulation, lots of interaction, and you don't need fancy toys to stimulate. You need things that are different colors. You need things that make different sounds, because we know that that stimulation makes those little brains grow. And the more your little brain grows, the smarter you will be.
That's great.
Any other questions? Okay, what I'm going to do is I will post this on to the website into WhatsApp, because I can do that now.
Proud of you.
And
Developmental milestone.
what I want though is really, if people have questions, if you are watching this video and you're going, I want to know more about that, write it down and I will post a video and I will post, I'll write up a small paragraph and post it online.
And remember that we're not just putting these on for you just to watch. We really want you to interact with it. So we're judging by how much you interact with us, how many questions you ask, how many things you watch, how many times you respond to us, so that you don't just graduate from the course and originally signing up for it. You have to also put effort into it. So we really want to hear from you. We really want to know that you're enjoying it, or if you're not, or if there's a problem with the time or with the I know some of you are having trouble watching or reading the textbook on your small phone, so we're going to try and find a way to solve that, but we can't fix it if we don't know. So please tell us what you're thinking. We really want to know.
And we are trying to do the videos because we know the videos are easier than the book. There is more information in the book. I'm trying to put in links that will give you more information and you can see it better. So we'll keep doing this because I want this to work. And I am away next weekend. I am going camping in Northern Ontario. So it will be just Bonnie, but I'll be back next week. I think we're going to do another lifespan section.
I need your help. Please help me.
Yes. So make sure people are there. Okay. So I will stop the recording and this will be up online in 15 minutes.
Thank you, Roseanne. That was great.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Happy camping.
Yeah. Oh, I got to